Welcome back to the Unraveler Show, everybody. I am AlanBondar, and I am a host with my awesome guest, apparently Bill the Butcher. I should be afraid. Alan, be very afraid, right? So, Bill, William, do you go by Bill or do you go by William? I'm confused now.
William, I've never liked Bill. If anybody remember the movie Gangs of New York, there was a character,
Yes.
Bill the Butcher. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that's what I love it. All right, so here's William the Butcher, Bill the Butcher. So we had some interactions online today, and it goes to show once again something about online, something about typing just loses that friendliness. It's weird, man. This is weird how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a phenomenon. That's the reason text messages are so dangerous. You don't really have the nonverbals and the inflections of people's voices to tell how they're delivering. So if you're not careful, you read into that. And I have a very matter of fact way of writing, so I don't really I try to work hard to lay in a little bit more I don't know, whatever you call it when I'm talking, but when I'm writing I'm fairly direct, and so anyway, it is what it is. So
no, but it's true. I know several times where I would send a text and I was just being goofy and humorous, and the person thought I was being mean, and I was like, no, I'm serious. I'm just
right, exactly.
Just get around, right? It's incredible how easy it is to do that through text and writing. But anyway, so here we are. We're back for round 7. So far, I think it's been a tremendously beneficial dialogue for me. Anyway, I hope for the viewers as well. I've really enjoyed hearing your perspectives. I feel like there is one thing, and I hope I'm correct here, but I think there's one thing so far that we can both actually have as a foundation base, an agreeable point. And I'm going to say what I think it is. And I hope this is accurate. And again, I know you may have your nuances to it, and me too, or whatever, but just as the most basic version of it, it is that we cannot know anything for certain. Can we agree on that? Is that a good starting point for us to both say you can't know anything for certain until you put other parameters in it, but just on the basic level, until we can say, like, for example, let's just say we add the parameter of the uniformity of nature, right? Well, as soon as you add that parameter, then you can say, okay, well, then I'm 100% certain 2 + 2 = 4 and will always equal 4. And that's just the way it's going to be for eternity. Because but until we set that parameter, if we're just leaving it at, we don't know anything for certain, then we can also say aliens created us or what, we don't know. So just at the very basic level, until you put the parameters in there, can we agree that we can't know anything for certain?
I think I could say yes. I'd have to qualify that with, and the reason for that is we are not infinite minds, and there may not, and I say this based on information that we have, there may not be an infinite universe, but it is nearly infinite, and it's so close to infinite that what is contained in it informationally would be impossible for any one human to be able to say, I know for sure, with certainty, very much. There's very few. We could probably, and this is why empirical science gives us something of value. And sometimes it sounds like, from our perspective, that we're really kind of beating up on empirical science. But the reality is empirical science does give us some limited certainties about various things. And it does that because it limits its scope. It says these are material measurements in what temperature does water boil at, those kind of things. And maybe we can know those for certain. But the vast majority of things that we experience and the vast majority of things that we operate throughout the day with are not certain in that kind of way, as far as I can tell. So I would say, yeah. And then again, you've already pointed out the fact, in order for me to even use empiricism, I have to start with certain assumptions. And you've used this analogy a lot. How do we know we're not brains in a vat? How do I know? Don't know. I could be a character in somebody's video game. I don't know. So I can't prove for sure a lot of things. And this is the work of a lot of philosophers, a lot of deep and not really well thought out thought processes have come to this problem. Is there's a gap between where we're at and what we know and the infinite amount that needs to be known. So yeah, I think there's a lot. I don't think there's a lot of certainty, not that kind of certainty that we can lean on. Yeah.
I mean, so like, philosophers like David Hume poked a hole in certainty for sure.
Mhm.
I thought, even like to his illustration of an oar, when you put it in the water, is it really bending, or is that just an illusion that the water makes?
Right.
How can you know? Because as soon as you put your head on the water, it straightens out. Maybe the oar just straightens out in that moment.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, and so the only way that we can decide whether or not that oar is not actually bending and is staying consistent is if we agree on the uniformity of nature. So I'm saying, like, until we can have some agreeable patterns or standards that we can say, hey, this universe is uniform. It's not going to change. We've seen consistency. Just because philosophy says it could somehow magically change the way gravity could not become gravity tomorrow, we're going to say, for the sake of conversation, in order to be able to get anywhere in dialogue, we're going to have to at some point say, yeah, we agree with the uniformity of nature at the very least, so that we can actually build from there. Because if not, then, we could just be two guys in a video game just talking, and then we're just wasting our time, and this just becomes stupid.
Sure.
Right. So, I mean,
there's, another just a cool thought. I mean, there's no really way to prove that we're not in a loop over the last 5 minutes, and we just have the impression that there's been time before and after that 5 minutes. We don't know. We think that's the case.
Correct.
We can appeal to memory, but it's become sketchy because research shows that memory is very faulty, and what people remember things that don't happen. And
yes, in my book, I call that reconsolidated memory.
Yeah. So certainty. No, I agree with that. I think definitely that. And I think that sort of, I think, and I actually have written some articles. I don't have the article, I've looked for it, but I wrote an article many years ago called the Sweet Lie of Rationalism. And it talks about how that in the Enlightenment, there was this sort of, people were saying within 50 years, we'll be able to explain everything. Well, 50 years passed and we can. And the idea was that we could ever cross that gap fully, that we could know with that sort of certainty. And I will say this, and I've heard you use this phrase a lot in terms of how people describe their religious faith. You said, I know that I know that I know. Well, I think that's sort of a reaction to that challenge. So you had people in the Enlightenment that said, we're going to be able to know the answer to everything. So religious people from that era felt like they needed to come up with an answer, and they come up with contrived answers at times, and they stretched, and they kind of undermine their own position by trying to give an answer rather than just saying straight up and down. There are things about the universe we don't know with that level of certainty, and that we may never know with that sort of certainty. And to say that we know with that sort of certainty is sort of being deceptive and misleading. And I think that does more harm than good than it does for religious people and their positions on things.
Okay, no, I think that's good. All right, so just before we broach the particular subject tonight about whether there's evidence for the existence of God, which is the title of your next chapter, I just want to let's start out this episode steel manning each other's positions so that we can see if we genuinely understand, and then we can get corrected where we're wrong. I want to try to steel man you first, and then after I steel man you, I'm going to draw the conclusion that I think is necessary from that steel man. Is that fair to do?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can do the same for me. So, from what I understand from our conversations so far, you believe that the empirical evidence, the data that we have so far, scientifically speaking, can best be explained by God, specifically Yahweh, the God of the Bible. So far, am I on track?
Maybe I would just you use the term Yahweh, and I think that's loaded for me.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of fundamentalist fundamentalistic thought that's attached to that way of saying that. But yeah, I think generally I'm going to say yes, but I do want to just qualify that with I do need to to add some things and comment on some things before I sign all the way off on that. But generally, I'm going to say yes.
Okay, well that's fascinating. Because maybe before we go any further, I would like to have clarity on that, because I want to make sure that if I'm discussing your God, I'm discussing the same God that I thought the Bible talked about. So,
Sure,
you
yeah,
go a little
it makes a
further
lot
with
of
that?
sense. But see, when you say that, okay, so and I'm going to try to. I don't want to wade off into a lot of ambiguity and give more questions than answers. But in some of these subjects, it's almost impossible not to create questions as we go along. But here, when you say the God of the Bible, okay, Jews read the Bible, Muslims read the Bible, Christians read the Bible, and then in those groups, there's multiple sects that read the same Bible, and they come up with different versions of the same Yahweh. Okay, so just because, so who's the God of the Bible? It's the God of the person reading the Bible. Okay, and so I think the problem I have with the Yahweh that maybe you're talking about is that it sounds like it leans into that sort of fundamentalist reading of the Bible, and I'm not a fundamentalist, and that's not how I read that. So I think generally I prefer to say theism, because theism is a bigger category, and it specifically talks about it has a clear set of ideas about what we're talking about, outside of speculation from people who read the Bible and come up with different opinions. So theism would say, that there's an ultimate source of being, of consciousness, of will, of purpose, of structure, all the things that all the things that theism says. I'm more comfortable saying that I think theism is the best answer, and not necessarily Yahweh, because Yahweh is a concept, as well as maybe the name of that being when correctly used. I don't know if that made sense or not, but maybe
So that's very hard for me to follow and even discuss, because that would almost be like me saying, let's discuss a particular toy, but you don't feel comfortable defining that toy. You just want to say toys. And I'm like, there's hundreds of toys. Which toy are you? Which toy is your favorite? Which toy are you talking about, so that we can actually discuss that toy? But you don't want to go there. You just want to say toys. So I don't know how to discuss your toy.
and that may be because you're coming at it from your concept of God starts with fundamental Christianity and moves outward. And for me, I think my concept starts with general theism and moves inward. And theism.
So in your concept, then it sounds like, if I'm paralleling it with toys, you could have multiple gods and still work. You're okay with that?
Yeah, matter of fact, we do have multiple gods. Yes. So I mean, in the framework of Judeo-Christianity, you do have multiple divines or beings that work within the framework of nature and God. So yes, we do.
Huh. I've never heard a Christian tell me that they believe there are multiple gods.
Well, they're out there. You just not the ones you're going to listen to. Not the most vocal ones, probably. But yeah, no, it's a phrase to, if those who may be interested in that. It's the concept of the divine council.
Well, no, okay, no, you're talking. Okay, no, okay, I'm following you then. You're Michael Heiser stuff. Okay, no, I held to that too.
Yeah.
No, sure, I held to that too when I was a Christian. That's not what I'm referring to when I speak of the God, the creator God. Because let me clarify then. Let's talk about the creator God. That's the one that I'm really trying to hone in on, because yes, there could be all kinds of gods because they rule different nations, but the top dog, I'm talking about your favorite damn toy, the toy that rules them all. I'm talking about Woody, you know, or maybe what's Woody's friend? I can't remember. The astronaut guy. You know,
Buzz Lightyear.
Buzz. Yeah. Woody or Buzz, whichever one's your favorite. That's what I'm talking about. I want to know who your Woody is. You know, who's the top dog?
In classical theism, God is not any of the toys. He's the toy box. Okay. God is transcendent to anything that's in the created order. That's a part of classical theism. In a book that does a much better job maybe talking about that than me right now is David Bentley Hart's The Experience of God. And it's not as mystical or spiritual as the title sounds. It really outlines classical theism and why fundamentalism isn't always classical theism, because really the God of fundamentalism is a being within creation. Honestly, some of the like the way Islam describes God at times is more like the most powerful of all beings. That's not the God of classical theism. If there were the most powerful of all beings, it would still be less than the God of classical theism. The God of classical theism is, to describe it one way, is the root and ground of being, the source of being. It's where being comes from. It's not like anything that's created. It's not like anything that exists. It is the reason that things do have existence. And so that's one of the aspects of.
When you say it's nothing like anything that exists, you mean anything else that exists, right? Is that what you meant to say?
The term is contingency. So everything that we know of in the world is contingent.
It exists too, is my point.
I'm going to say yes to be fair and not to be hokey and play games. But the reality is there's some people who are classical theists that would say God doesn't exist. And what they mean by that is that anything that exists is contingent. God is the thing that. So this is not an example analogy that works well all the way out, but like a fish lives in water, right? Water is the substance or the essence that the fish lives in. And beings, contingent beings, exist within this thing called being. We have existence. God is what gives, in classical theism, is what gives existence. It's where existence happens at, but it's not something existing itself, because an existing thing needs something else to give it existence. The God of classical theism doesn't, is outside of that. And so and this is a difficult point for me to communicate very quickly, and it sounds a bit like I'm making things up, but if you look at it, it's really a very well thought out sort of approach to this, that when we say something has existence, when we say something has being, it gives it a sense of contingency to start with. And so God would transcend that. Whatever God would be wouldn't be existing in the way things that we think of as beings exist. It would be giving that opportunity to those things to exist. Maybe the space in which in which existence happens, we could say that. Maybe that's a very general one. The space in which existence happens would be God.
But wouldn't that space be something that exists?
Technically, yes.
I mean, it's almost like you're saying that God is nothing, and out of nothing comes something. If it doesn't exist,
God is not something that is material, and God is not something that is, okay, right. So but that is an affirmation. It is, God is not something that exists. God is that which gives the possibility of existence to all things.
So nothing can produce something.
Well, according to science, yes.
Well, apparently, according to your definition of God, too.
Well, I mean, I can't go. We're back to science. My definition of God aligns with science. I mean,
this is great. I think we may have just solved the world's problems, William.
Maybe so. Maybe.
Apparently, God is the same as science. Something comes from nothing. This is amazing.
Well, and that thought process can help there. Okay, so just from a material aspect, you know, the infinite recesses, right? Everything that exists usually came from something else before
No,
it.
no, no,
Cause
no.
and effect.
Everything that has a beginning has something come before it. Not everything that exists. They're not the same thing.
Well, everything that exists has a beginning.
Nope, that's not true. That's an
Well,
assumption. Why is that a true statement?
well,
How do you know that that's a true statement?
because the only things that we can observe that exist have a beginning.
Well, the only things we can observe, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, and that's also not necessarily true, because even things we do observe, we actually don't know if they had a beginning. Like
Mm-hmm.
energy, for example, they still don't know where it came from. It just exists.
Well, actually, the science actually, and when we say science, that's a very vague term, but there's mathematics and there's data to support that things like energy and
It
space
can't
and
be
time,
created or destroyed. That's the whole definition of energy.
but they did begin at a certain point.
It can't be created. Therefore, it's not have a beginning.
But they did. So what's the problem? What's going on there? And that's not me being a theist. That's me talking about basic science, physics that are this taught, everywhere. The world, time, space, energy, and matter do have a beginning. There's a point of beginning. And then the question is, what happened? What was before that point? There's a lot of evidence of the Big Bang, theory. There's a lot of scientific physical evidence that the world began at this point, expanded outward, and then at that point, time and space began to exist. Matter and energy began to exist. These are not contrived things that I need to make up to prove that God exists. These are just things that seem to be vindicated by the best physical science we have. And the question still remains, what happened before then? And some of the theories there are things like multiverse. Maybe there's infinite universes being formed, and we just happen to be the one that ended up creating conscious life. I mean, maybe that's true. There's just no scientific evidence that even exists. It's a hypothetical theory that has no evidence. It's just as faith-based as me saying that God is the creator.
But your argument that everything that exists must have a beginning, like that actually goes completely against the classical theism that you were proposing. Like the whole Kalam arguments, the cosmological argument, is based on the idea that God is the only being that exists but has no beginning.
That's why we would say that God is not a being in that way, because
that's
everything would be.
Theism. So that is classical theism, man.
No, that's what people think classical theism is.
Okay, because I mean, you'll have to take that up with William Lane Craig then, because that's definitely.
Yeah, I don't agree with Craig. Craig's not right.
Well, I mean, okay, you may disagree with him, and you may disagree with classical theism, but you can't say that's not classical theism.
No, he's wrong. He's not. If he says that God is a being in the same way that other things are beings,
I didn't say that. I didn't say in the same way. I just said a being. I didn't say in the same way. Now you're adding that. That's not what I said.
So, but all other things that exist, with the exception of what I would call God, have a beginning. They have an origin.
That may be true, but to draw the conclusion that because all these things you know of have a beginning, that therefore everything that exists must have a beginning. That's as a big a leap as saying that God exists because we don't have a better explanation. Like, I still don't understand how you make these conclusions, man. Where do you come up with this stuff?
Well, again, follow the rationality here, and I'm not making this up. This Google research will quickly show you this is standard science. Got nothing to do with religion. That time, space, energy, and matter began at a single point in the far distant past. And from that originates everything that we can observe, see, and experience today. That's not religious, that's science, which supposedly most everybody believes or tries to believe. And the question, and it's a scientific question, is what happened before then? What caused everything? What caused, and not just material, what caused time? What caused space? What caused matter to exist? What causes energy to exist? And so that is a scientific question. It's a valid question. It's a reasonable question. And so it leads us to give an answer. And so I'm going to give you an answer. My answer is I believe that the God of classical theism is the cause of everything that exists.
But he's not existent.
Not within the sphere of it. Acts 20, Acts, I think it's 16:28. Paul says, "In Him we live and move and have our being." So this is a theistic concept that within the sphere of the being of God, the source and ground of being, that all other things have their being within His existence. So we could start there, and I would say
you just said within His existence. I thought you said He didn't exist.
Well, and I also said when I said that's a contentious and critiqued way of explaining that. Some people would say that God doesn't have existence because that's applying to Him a term that applies to things in the material world that also are needy or contingent or based on other things.
Well, you keep referring to the material world every time you say exists. Do you not think things in the immaterial world exist?
Sure, I do. Yes.
Why do you keep qualifying it by the word material?
Well, I guess what I try to do is I try to put myself in the place of the person I'm talking to, and I try to begin with what I think they will accept. That's true.
But I told you I'm not a materialist, so you don't have to do that.
That's a dangerous place for an atheist to be.
Either, but what's that?
It's a dangerous place for an atheist to not be a materialist. Because,
no, you could be a naturalist. Totally. I don't have to be.
How does that? That's it's if you're a naturalist.
No, because I think there are laws that are immaterial. I'm not a materialist. Not yet. I don't know where I'll stand in the future, but right now I'm just a naturalist. I don't see.
I'm glad that you're not a materialist. I mean, I think you're closer to the truth than farther away from it because of it. But,
I love it.
I don't really know that you have. I think it puts your present position in some degree of jeopardy, which I don't have a problem with you being there, but I think it is a problem for it. But I that's why I start with things like the material world. I'm trying to reference points of references that we both take as obvious, or that don't need a lot of debate for us to agree that these seem to be clear references. So material things do exist. I think we both agree that that's true. For the most, we've gone round and round about why that may not be as certain as we'd like for it to be, but.
We're working within the agreement of the uniformity of nature, right? I mean, right. We can qualify brains in a vat. I mean, otherwise, it's just disqualify that.
We could, at some point, you just devolve into total chaos there, and there's nothing to even talk about because we don't even words have meaning at that point. So that's not going to be productive. But if I start with this idea that something caused everything, and I don't think that is a religious point. I don't know that it's a proven scientific point, but I think it's a very, very good hypothesis that could be that.
Well, look, I'm going to roll with that, and I'm going to say that even if we discovered that nothing produced everything we have, I would be inclined to say that nothing is actually something, and if nothing else, more than a roll of a dice, an equation, a hypothesis, a probability. It's going to be something. It's not a nothing. It's nothing as far as we define it, but in the end, it's going to be something.
Yes, and your thought process is actually the correct one, because here's the problem with nothing. Anytime you name it, it stops being nothing. It becomes something, right?
Correct.
So it is a something, but what sort of something is it? And it could be a totally mindless, conscienceless force that we don't understand that's possible. Okay.
Yeah, right.
At this point, I would say it's possible.
Sure.
And maybe even after I finish rationalizing, maybe it still is possible. But what I'm going to talk about here is not certainties like we've kind of discussed. We don't really think maybe exist for us in our finite states here. But I'm going to talk about probabilities and things that are most rational. And I think that's a very fair way of looking at things.
All right, so can I pause you instead of you saying that? This brings us back to the beginning. I'm supposed to be steel manning you.
Sure.
We went off on tangent because I apparently was off base because I didn't understand your particular God. So now I realize he's He's as non-existent as the possible nothing that actually becomes something that produces everything. Is that kind of fair?
That's where we start measuring, but
just for far measure. But then from your perspective going forward, when you evaluate all the data and you look at everything going on, and you consider your arguments about, where you said, from the very beginning, why would people actually produce the idea of God if they didn't have that as a working point? Because otherwise, and all this stuff, you said it over the weeks, and I get it. Like all that's, I disagree with those arguments, but because of all those thoughts and everything, I'm just trying to steelman you. God, whoever this God is, this theism God that is not necessarily a being that exists, but is a life source that all things flow out of perpetually forever. And I would say that's an existence of some sort, but not in the same way that all other things exist. You would say that this being, this not being, it's hard, man, it's hard to use your language. It's not
let's use being, because that's confusing to the topic, and it's not. I don't hate that term. I was trying to clarify the distinction between things that were caused and things that are without a cause. So let's just use being, and that makes it clear.
Let me. So this uncaused being,
yes, okay, that's fair.
Yes, mind is the most probable explanation as to all of the scientific data, especially classic apologetics, that points to all of the possibilities of how this universe came about. And your theory is this non-created being, eternal non-created being. Is that the word I used? What was the word I used?
Uncaused.
Uncaused. Yeah, sorry, I like that word. That's a good word. Uncaused being is the most likely probability because it has conscience, it has personality, it has character traits that he can, and he has to be a he, I'm guessing, unless you're comfortable with saying God could be a she, which would go against the Bible. But, I don't know if I'm steelmailing you at this point. I'm just trying my best to understand your position. Could be an it. I don't know. I don't know what your position is. I'm trying here. This uncaused being that isn't really a being that is the life source for all things because it seems to fit, or he seems to fit the data and the historical analysis of why human beings have always sought after a God. But why this God is considered anything other than energy is, I think I'm running into circles here, man. I'm going to need your help.
Okay, so first of all, yeah, I think you're that this is a phased, what I'm presenting to you. Now, we're going to flip this and we're going to talk about what you have a problem with. And I think when we talk about that, and particularly my responses to what you're saying, a lot of the things you're going to disagree with, I'm going to disagree with as well. A lot of things you're going to say doesn't make sense, and I'm going to say the same thing. So I'm not trying to present that view that you don't particularly think is very concrete. And that's sometimes why we're having a hard time disagreeing with each other, is because we're disagreeing with some of the same things and we're agreeing with some of the same things. So this is sort of a reasoned, layered step-by-step rationalization. So if I start with this uncaused singularity. Okay, let's call it that, an uncaused singularity. A singularity may or may not be conscious, but it was something before things that caused those things to happen. And because of the problems of infinite regress, that something, that state of somethingness had to have been I think it has to be, and a lot of mathematics and science says it has to be an uncaused sort of state. We'll call it uncaused singularity. Why does that mean that? Where do we go from there to say the God of classical theism? And I'm going to add this next contingency, or this next thought to it, is what is caused has to be at least equal to, or the cause of something has to at least be equal to or greater than what it causes. Okay,
Wait,
based on,
wait, you got to stop right there. Right off the bat, dude. I need you to prove that. Why?
well, that's everything we observe.
No, it's not. That's the exact opposite of what we observe. Evolution proves the exact opposite, dude. Every day I evolve from being a lesser person to a better person.
No, that's your perception of that.
No, it's not. I absolutely become something different every day because it's something if I read a book, I become more intelligent than I was the day before.
Where did you come from?
What do you mean, where did I come from?
I mean, where did you come from? What's your answer to that question? It says it's not a trick question. Where did you come from?
Well, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, like the best answer I have for that immediately is my mom.
Okay, and is your mom a human being?
Yes,
What about your dad?
also a human being.
Okay, so you have two human beings. So it took two human beings to make one Alan.
Sure.
So the cause of Alan is equal to or greater than Alan. And just
Well,
a very material.
numerically, yes, but not
Sure.
intelligently.
Okay, where does your intelligence come from?
Well, clearly not my parents.
Okay,
Sorry, I don't
your
hate my parents, but yeah,
your
definitely not.
well, it comes from various things, right? But it comes from your genetic capacity to learn. It comes from other sources of information you've absorbed. But what you've learned, the things you've learned from, are greater than what you know. Would you say that? What you've learned from is greater than what you know now.
What I've learned from is greater than what I know now. In some cases, but I would not say that that is true across the board. No.
Okay. And you can take this and you
Could
can keep working and working and working, and you won't find an instance of anything that exists that has been caused, and everything that we know of. And if we're going to say, well, they could be, should be, would be, what does exist, that what we know exists, has a cause, and the cause is always equal to or greater than what is caused. That is
No, I mean,
always
no, you got to qualify greater to or equal. If you're talking numerically, maybe, but you can't just say that across the board.
whatever measurement or category you apply to, no matter what the category, what caused it is always equal to or greater than what it caused. And if you don't think that's true, I'm going to ask you to I can give you a billion examples of that being true. Give me one example where it's not true.
All right, let me see if I can think of one. Hang on. When I take a vodka and a Kahlua and some cream, and I mix those three ingredients together, I make a much better drink than any of those taste individually.
Okay.
Numerically, it required three, but the taste is so far superior that none of those could produce individually.
You're saying that the taste quality of those three things together is better than the individual taste of the.
Yes. So you took three individual things, you produced one thing that was far superior than the initial three.
But the three things that you use to make those things, are they equal to what's in the drink?
I mean, sort of, because now they've been mixed, so you'll never separate them again.
Okay. So, and you realize when you're describing something like a drink, where you could talk about the material quantity of the drink. You're talking about the taste profile, and you're saying, but taste profile is sort of a perception of something. So you may mix those drinks together for me, and I might think that tastes disgusting.
Well, I mean, sure. I mean, we're talking about preference. Okay, so let me try and use something more solid. You're building a house, and in order to build your walls, you need sheetrock and you need plywood, and you need not plywood. That's for the floors. But you need studs and you need nails. All of those products individually don't do anything. They're functionless until you put them together, and then that house is a marvelous thing.
So what you're describing is when you create structure.
Yeah.
The structure has purpose and utility. But at no point is the house ever more or less material than the parts that you make the house from.
More or less material. I mean, I would disagree with that simply by the fact that once the house is built, it becomes a home. and it's far more better than those products individually.
Well, a home is also a perception, but
I mean, bro, you can't deny that you put a family in there and that gives it life. It makes that home, it makes that house something far better than those individual pieces would have ever done just laying on the ground.
okay. Well, let's talk about the concept of a home.
I mean,
Then.
all I'm saying is this is the whole point I'm making is this is what evolution does. You take what's less, you put it all together, and you make something better. And that thing that's better is far superior than those products were individually by themselves.
The problem with saying that evolution does something is that it gives purpose to a mindless process. And if you add purpose to a mindless process, then you need an explanation for the purpose.
A mindless process. Can you explain that again?
Well, you said evolution. That's what evolution does. It makes things better, essentially. If that's the case, then you've applied purpose to a mindless process.
Well, no, evolution doesn't make anything better. Evolution just happens, and because of the process, it becomes better. It's not like it's a mindful person up there creating things and making them better. See, that's the argument of theism. It's a God up there, but the problem is theism works the exact opposite. It made everything perfect, and then, oh my God, something happened, and this theistic God couldn't stop it, and everything just fell apart and went to shit.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go back to where we started. And what you've done is you've given perceptions of physical things and said the perception of this pile of material is better than the perception of this pile of material. And that's not really what we're talking about. What caused it? Remember, the thing was whatever is caused has to be greater or equal to the thing it causes. So what causes a house? Okay. Now, you could say the material causes the house, but material doesn't put itself together. A person causes the house. So is a human being greater in structure, complexity, and capacity, and all the other things than the material house that they build? And the answer is obviously yes, a billion times yes, because we could build thousands of houses. So the cause of the house is greater than the house. The cause of anything is greater than the thing that it caused. And I would say equal to just giving space. But
I mean, okay, if you're talking about the cause of the house being the human being that built it,
mm-hmm.
That's greater until the whole family moves in, and then that's greater.
But the family's not the cause.
No, but the cause produces better things.
But I didn't build the family.
That's what I was. But
you're talking.
You build the family by working at it. Like
no, you don't.
There's so much involved.
You didn't take some screws and nails and hammer and plaster and make a family.
You did that to build a house
the
family that you built emotionally. So the
object is the house. What caused the house to exist? It's the designer. It's the person who builds it. And it's the material used to build it.
Sure, a whole bunch of things that without being put together serve a far less purpose.
Okay, purpose, we can talk about purpose a lot. But
not just purpose, less value, less intelligence, less quality, less usefulness in every single way, less.
And I would really actually like to talk about purpose because I will tell you that without purpose, structure becomes irrelevant. Purpose is what gives structure its value. Okay. The reason why I'm taking boards and nails and plaster and putting them in a certain structure is because the purpose of the structure is to house something. And so when we do add value through purpose, to structure, it's because of purpose, and purpose is the act of will. Now, but this original thought was whatever we cause. So the equal sign or the part of the equation we have to look for is cause. So if something is caused, then we have to ask the next question, is that thing greater than what it caused? And every single time, in every instance, the answer is yes, it is greater. It's a physical law. It has to answer for what it caused. It's like if I said I brought you a firecracker and I set it off in your living room and it blew the whole city block up. That makes zero sense because the explosion has to explain what it did, right? Cause and effect. That's how cause and effect works. Anything that's caused. Matter of fact, it's a law of physics. For every action, there is an equal an opposite reaction. It's a absolute law of physics. Whatever it's caused, that's why I say it has to be equal to it. At least has to be equal, and typically is greater than what it caused. So whatever that something is, whatever that something that exists that causeless, that what did we say, that uncaused something, whatever it is, has to be greater than or equal to everything caused.
So let's just for a second, and by the way, if you're viewing this, William and I are going to talk for about another 12, 13 minutes, and then we're going to start taking questions. I'm going to read through your chat. I see some comments here about trolls and stuff. You'll all have to help me to do this. I'm no techie. I'm doing the best I can and learning as I go. So if you have ideas how to ban this Wesley guy, that'd be great. Just you can either message me privately or message here. I don't care. So I can figure out how to do that. Because yeah, trolls are annoying. But anyway, so we're going to be taking questions here in a few minutes, and I'll read through them and see if we missed any. So William, if I may, so let's just for the sake of argument, because I don't know that you would disagree with this, and I hope you don't, but maybe you do. Let's just say evolution is a thing, is accurate, is true. Are you on board with that, or do I have to make this hypothetical?
No, I think I'm on board with it very quickly, and I don't, at least on many levels, if not 100%. I don't really have a problem with evolution on most levels.
Okay,
maybe not at all. Maybe not at any level. So whatever.
So would you then use your same approach that you've been talking about for the last 10 minutes here to say that we are not better than our predecessors?
Are we better than our predecessors? How am I measuring that? Am I measuring that as a theist, or am I measuring this?
In my opinion, in every single way, we're better.
Okay, if I'm a materialist, I'm going to say there's no way for me to say whether I'm better or worse. As a theist, I'm going to definitely say that what we are is better than where we came from in particular ways, but still where we came from isn't its own.
Wait, let's start there then. In what particular ways? Because those particular ways would seem to contradict everything you just said so far. So please explain what particular ways we're better than the products that made us.
Okay, so first of all, again, there's two approaches to this. If I'm a materialist,
yeah,
I can say nothing about it being better. I can't. If we all died today and there was nothing left but cockroaches and mushrooms, maybe the cockroaches evolve into the species that dominate the universe. I don't know. Well, who knows what good is and better in that world? As a theist, I believe that we are made in the image of God. Our who we are is in the image of God, and so therefore we are at a place of hierarchy in this created order. So yeah, as a theist, I would say we are. I think I'd rather use that term. We are at a place of hierarchical. We're above other things hierarchically in the material world because we are the image of God. But as a materialist, I couldn't say that. I could not give you a reason why it's better for all human life to exist, no human life to exist. Let's save humanity. Why? I'm going to be dead in maybe 50, 60 years. Why would it matter? We'll all be dead eventually. Eventually, the whole universe will be dead. So who cares?
Who cares if he lives eternally as well? Who cares?
Well, that's a good question. Why would we? It's the same question. It's the same question. Just that from why do we care if humanity exists?
The answer is simple. It's because you live once and you want to make value of your life. That's it. It has nothing to do with whether you live eternally or don't live eternally.
Because we know intrinsically and experientially that human life is not just some random thing. It is a precious and it is a divine thing.
I agreed with the first sentence. I didn't agree with the second one.
You can say that, but the way you're going to react to that, you're going to treat it, and rightfully so, sacredly. And what it means with holy reverence.
I'll be all right with treating it sacredly if you take away the God and just say, because we're here and we live once, I'm going to treat this life as reverently as I can because it's the best life that I have and it's all I've got, and I'm going to do the best I can with it. I want to live my best possible life.
Why would you do that?
Because
here's another. Let me add this before.
Why would you do it if you lived eternally?
Why
would you wait until eternally?
Not just why, but how. because the question is not, and in some religious circles, and when we get into fundamentalism, I think that's the problem that I'll have with it. Fundamentalism tends to be all why and ignoring how. But classical theism and Orthodox Christianity is more about how. It's, if I'm going to live the best life I'm supposed to live, how do I do that? What does that look like? What does that mean for me every moment, every day, day in and day out? And that's where the rationality comes in. I need to, and we could say, well, we just know, but that's not true, because we still have prison systems and we still have mental institutions, and we have things that indicate that it's not necessarily intuitive and easy to just be a good human being. We do have to work at it. We do have to grow at it. We do have to.
But as a theist, you made an incorrect statement just like 30 seconds ago. You said, "What is the best way for me to live?" No, that's what's the best way that God wants you to live. That's all you care about as a theist, or you should, because your question is more in line with what I would say.
It's the same question. It's the same question.
No, because for me, it's what's the best way for me to live. For you, it's the best way God wants you to live. And you got to spend your life figuring out how this God wants you to live. And all I care about is what's best for me. What do I want out of this life? Because it's the only one I got. You care about what God wants you to do. And because your life matters for eternity and you got to live for this God, that's suffering to me. That sounds like a horrible way to live. I used to live it, so I get it.
Sure. You're familiar with Marcus Aurelius and the Stoics, correct?
Sure.
And then one of the principal ideas of Stoicism is to live in accordance to nature. It's the idea is living in harmony with reality and living in harmony with nature, and that is the essence of theism. It's not about, it's not about proving God exists. It's about living and accepting the fact that I exist and the reasoning why it matters. Because the reality is without a framework, you can say, well, it doesn't matter. People deal with depression and anxiety and all sorts of things because of mental states and the way they approach and think about the world. So saying that the way we think about things and the way we approach things and the meaning that we apply to things is irrelevant doesn't even align with human psychology. It is not the way we exist. It is important what we believe. It is important why we believe what we believe. And when I say,
I agree with that.
And I thought about this, and I want to say this out loud because I've been thinking it ever since we had our last conversation. I'm going to throw it out here. I don't think there is a humanism without theism. I think without a theistic view, you don't have a consistent humanism. A real humanism is a view that sacred, it sanctifies and holds as sacred human life and human existence to the point that where even if I think what you're doing is immoral, as long as you're not destroying other people, I need to allow you the existential right to work out your life. I need to defend your ability to make decisions and your freedom, and all the things that humanism would argue for is only really rationally grounded in the fact that humanity has a divine purpose. There's a divinity to humanity, and that is what particularly Orthodox Christian theism says. And that's one of the reasons why it aligns with truth for me, is because it does declare that message that there is a divineness to human existence, and that I should respect that in myself, and I should respect that in other people, even when other people are not doing what I want them to do. Because in our, not to go off preaching blah blah blah, but pardon me, but in our view of things, Christ teaches us how to react to other people. So if Christ isn't out killing everybody and murdering everybody, I shouldn't do that either. If Christ is forgiving, I should forgive. If Christ is, so Christ gives me this image, this icon to pattern my life after, so that I have a measurement, at least a foundation to begin about how to be a good person and how to live every day. Now you could say, well, what about people who do that without Christ? Well, then they're still following the same principles, even though they do it without maybe the affirmation that I have. And I don't disrespect that. I'm not going to say there's no value to that because they don't say it. I'm never going to say that. That's not what we say. But what we do say is, and I've gone too long, I'm sorry, but the question of is not necessarily why do things exist, but how do I exist? That's a very much more important question. And that's why theism is important to me. That's why I think it is a very, very important concept.
So we started the show. We were going to steelman each other. We ended up spending the entire show with me trying to steelman you and trying to figure you out.
I'm sorry. I wish I could do better. I
That's
really
all right. Turns out you're more like a fish in water that I can't seem to catch and figure out what your God is. So I'm all over the place. I know you're trying, and you have a very mystical type of God, and it's just I can't nail it down. It's very slippery. And my conclusion was going to be that you've chosen Yahweh, the God of the Bible, to be your God, and it's a abhorrent God, and he does all this, and supports rape, slavery, and pedophilia, and blah blah blah. But it turns out that's not your God either. So I don't know which God you serve. I have no idea. He's a God that doesn't actually exist, but sort of exists, brings life to people. He's your Woody. I don't know, man.
If you would like to learn about this God, start attending an Eastern Orthodox parish, and you will
I
learn
can
all
tell you
about
right now that ain't going to happen. But thank you. I would just hope that we can go forward in the future, and maybe you can nail it down a little bit better, because I don't want to spend 50 years having to figure out how to define this God. I would love to just have a definition. Like, that would be really nice. But we'll have to save that for another show, because I don't think it's going to happen today. But we have like maybe just a couple of minutes here, and this may turn into a whole nother show. But I'm curious if maybe you can do better than I did with you and steelman me as we conclude the show and take questions.
I'll give it a try. I don't like to do that, but I'm going to try. And here I'm supposed to be caricaturizing your argument, right? That's what this is.
Yes, stating it as accurately as you think.
Okay.
I would.
Okay. Right. Okay. Excellent. I would think that your argument is that the way God is portrayed and has been portrayed, in the way that it's spoken in matter of fact terms, doesn't seem to align with any measurement that you could find to prove that. And you've tried in a lot of ways to find that measurement very diligently, and you've not been able to find that. And without that particular sort of way of measuring and proving the existence of God, you remain skeptical, and you're not necessarily you're not antagonistic to the idea of God, but you really would like somebody to give you a rational argument or a rational framework that really just rings a bell in your head and says that's true. And you just haven't had that experience yet. And most of what you've been given has been unsatisfactory. And a lot of it is just full of holes that you can easily see. Did I do okay?
Wow. Within 2 minutes, you nailed it. No fish, man. There's no fish there.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Either I've been clear or you've been listening. One or the other. I don't know. And maybe I'm just not listening and you've been clear. I don't know, man. But that was perfect. I don't know that I could have said that any better. That's atheism in a nutshell. Thank you, William. Well done, dude. Absolutely well done. All right, I'm going to scroll through the questions here or the chat and see what we got here. Thank you all for being a part of this. This is so much more fun with listeners or viewers, rather. So let's see if we got anything here going on. Is this live? Yes. No. Yes. Real bread. I don't know who this guy is. 57. Okay, this must be Wesley. He's the troll. Okay. Someone in here
Does Wesley have any valid questions? I mean,
no, I don't think so. I think he's just a troll. He's just, like they said, he's just throwing out stupid comments. Someone in here, I came and going from prison. Might help to get him from prison. Okay, this might also be another troll. Yeah, Marquise Climb. I think he's another troll. Wow, we got trolls going on up in here.
Hey,
all right, let's see. Homemaker calling. I know she's a real person. Let's see what she says. Though I have left Christianity, I still find evolution to be convenience. Symbiotic relations get me every time. Thoughts? I do appreciate these talks. Very challenging and thoughtful provoking. What do you think, man? You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and so I think
of course you do.
What I do, think about things. I think about things so much I have a hard time giving a short answer. I think what she's saying there is that even though she doesn't fit into the Christian worldview, that when she talks about that the answer of evolution often is itself a stopgap, giving an answer for things that are difficult to explain, particularly symbiotic relationships. Like there are certain kind of bees that have to have a certain kind of flower to nectar. I think there's one that works on a cactus, and it has to be a certain time of year, to a certain place, and it's improbable enough for both of those two beings to exist. And the fact that they've evolved side by side to be so precisely intertwined, it seems to increase the improbability of their existence. Very difficult to explain that. And I will tell you, I would like to give you a theistic answer to just shoot holes in evolution, but I would tell you the problem with that is the scientific theory of evolution is under scrutiny, and the general Darwinian type of natural selection and the power of death, basically, and mating to shape and form things is being sort of set to the side. And we're going back to the concept of epigenetics, and there is plenty of research that shows that the experience of the creature itself turns on certain genetic code in the DNA, and so and that's passed along to their offspring. So Lamarck wasn't totally off base when he said the giraffe reaches up to get the fruit, and so in other words, epigenetics may explain some of this, and I'm not really quickly to just say, well, that seems really difficult and mysterious, so God must have did it. But you do start wondering when you start seeing all of these very rarefied events that keep lining up to create, it seems to be creating this certain kind of result. It does sort of seem like it's screaming to us something's going on other than just something blew up a long time ago and now we're on Facebook talking to each other. So that's my thoughts. Rambling thoughts as usual. Yes.
No, dude. No, I mean, it's great. I mean, one thing I appreciate about you is that even though you could come at it, from a theistic proof, just to prove a point, you're honest. And I've always appreciated about you. Like, that's one of the reasons this show works is because you're willing to just be like, yeah, I don't know things all the time. And you're willing to concede stuff. It's great. It really makes sense. But I appreciated that explanation. Evolution being convenient. I mean, I struggle with that comment simply because I don't think science has a dog in the fight when it comes to trying to prove or disprove God. It's not like science is sitting here saying, well, we hate the idea of God, so we're going to come up with an idea that disproves God, evolution. That's just not the way it works. Christians, by and large, have to have their God. And so they're biased towards it. So anything that goes against God, it's like, oh, that's not going to work. It's got to be God only. Whereas science is like, hey, look, if we end up drawing conclusions that God is the creator of the universe, then by all means, that's the answer. And they're going to roll with that. They don't, like I said, they don't have a dog in the fight. It's not like they're trying to prove or disprove it one way or the other. They're just trying to be honest with the evidence. Because look, even if you did discover that God, a God or this God or whatever God is the creator of the universe, that doesn't mean you have to bow to it or submit to it or whatever. I mean, you can if you want to, but so I don't think evolution is the alternative answer just to go against God. It's not like that. It seems to be what is actual, just like the Big Bang, and that's why it's the best running theory right now. Now, are they questioning it to some degree? Now, sure. But that's what science is always going to do. It's going to constantly question. It's going to constantly come up with new discoveries. It's going to constantly say, hey, we've got something better now. Because never prior to that have they said, now we know with 100% certainty that this is the answer. Science doesn't do that. It hasn't done that with anything, ever. Christianity, on the other hand, maybe William being the exception, does do that. We know with 100% certainty it's God. No, you don't. And both William and I have demonstrated in these discussions over the last 7 episodes that you can't say that, and that it's absurd to say that. You can't know that. So scientifically speaking, science is just trying to discover the best answer, positing what it is, testing, doing peer review, proposing a theory, then at that point saying this is the best data that we have, and that's what we're rolling with it now until we have something better. And it continues to research and continues to research. Listen, if I thought God was at some point going to be the scientific answer to what we're studying and how we all came about, I wouldn't think that we'd be backtracking. You'd think we'd be going in the other direction, more solidifying God in all of these things. But instead, it seems like the more we advance scientifically, the less we have need for God to answer anything. So I'm at a point where I'm like, yeah, it's just weird. God was the answer back then, but the more science develops, the less God seems to be the answer. So I think we're going to continue to move in that direction. Contrary to what William thinks, I think the more theism dies,
Oh,
the more
you
humanism will rise. And I think that we'll develop more as a society and a human race. So that's my thoughts. Um, Here we go. I love this comment. I thought this was hilarious. A couple things here. Michael Beverly says a house compared to a living creature is a bad analogy. So the analogy is worthless. He says, when houses start having sex, the argument might work. Until then, it's dumb and pointless.
and we will also have some very interesting YouTube videos. But
I have a feeling that was directed at me. So, because I think I brought up the house analogy. So, all right, very well. So, let's see what this question relates. If your guest believes evolution is true, what's the point of the house analogy? Natural selection explains complex living creatures. Maybe he should attack abiogenesis. What do you think, William?
I think that science at this point has zero answers for abiogenesis. And I think that as the best I can think about it, and I do try to be honest, I have no scientific explanation why living things exist. There seems to be nothing material or close to us material that explains the very complex cells and processes. The more we study the cell, the more we study life, the more complex it becomes, the less we know about it, the less we can answer it with just Newtonian type mechanics. I don't think I think of biogenesis. I think this is one of the places where I will contend that we don't have a good answer for it, and this might be a place where we just have to say, now, it may be down the road somebody figures out how to take all the chemicals. We know all the chemicals to create a living thing. You could take a frog, put it in a blender, and don't do that. That's cruel. But you could do that, and you'd have all the chemicals for a frog. And we have zero clue how to make the frog. We can't even make a hair on the frog. But this come out of the mud of a boiling volcanic earth 4-point-something billion years ago. This is a point that I think people should seriously consider. Why did life originate here? We have zero answer for it. So I would be glad to attack it. I would attack it, but I want to be cautious because I don't think that even if we knew today how to make a living cell in a test tube, it would still shake my faith in what I'm saying here. I don't think knowing how things happen is the point, or not knowing how things happen is the point. It's the general fact that anything exists at all. That's a much bigger point. So anyway.
There's a follow-up question to that, so don't get off your high horse just yet, William. Keep answering, because he says, if and when abiogenesis, Jesus Christ, if and when abiogenesis is shown to be what happened, what will your guest attack next? The origin of the universe? Feel free to respond, bro.
If and when abiogenesis is shown to be what happened, what will be? Okay, so this is I appreciate Michael's statement of faith here. He's absolutely certain that maybe that would happen. For me, again, knowing how things happen, I know how babies are born. I'm sure Michael does too. But just because I know that a sperm cell and egg cell come together and create a human being over several months, doesn't mean I've explained the existence of human beings very well. I just identify the cause. If someday down the road we can say, well, this sort of radiation and this sort of electricity and this sort of chemicals come together, it produces the first living cell. But if you study living cells, the more you study them, actually, they're like factories. They're like city factories full of chemicals that are moving, and there's so many essential. But if that were to happen, we still only explained how it happened, or maybe the cause that made it start happening. We haven't explained the phenomena itself. And so, again, I don't think for me that that's going to be the problem. To me, it's more generally the fact that all of these, how many coincidences, guys, how many phenomena are just going to coincidentally come together to create your existence in this moment? How many of those are going to happen before you finally stop and say something seems to be happening on purpose?
All right, fair enough. Homemaker Calling says to our last comments about her evolution things. No, I'm saying I don't hold to evolution because of symbiotic relations. I don't know if that's a comment to correct what I said or what you said. I don't know.
I would say this. I don't say this very often because if I say it, people think I'm coming at it as a theist, but I'm not. I'm coming at it from a scientific. I do have serious questions about the theory of evolution, not the whole thing, but there are clearly more things going on that can be explained by Darwinian evolution. And I'm not saying the answer to that is God. There could be a scientific theory that we're missing something, but Darwinian evolution, and there are many scientists who study this to say the same thing. There are serious questions about whether that can do what we need it to do. And so I can agree with you. I think some parts of evolution. I mean, we have a penguin, we have an ostrich, and you have an eagle. Those are obviously all birds. They're very different. Something's happened over a long period of time to those creatures that changed them. I think some evolution seems to be obvious, but some of the things that happen do seem to be preposterously improbable. And again, that doesn't mean God did it. It just means maybe the theory we have now isn't good enough. But I'll respond. I agree with you. I do have some skepticism, which I don't talk about a lot because people take it the wrong way. But anyway.
No, that's fine. So when it comes to symbiotic relations, I mean, to some degree, as far as evolution is concerned, wouldn't it require at some point for the lesser species to benefit from the greater species in order to evolve? I mean, I don't know why that would be a negative to evolution. It would seem to me to enhance it, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a scientist, but just my thoughts. William would have better answers to that, and he gave it. So let's see. What do we got here? Let's see. Here's a question or maybe a comment. Michael Beverly, if evolution isn't true and a solid fact, it would mean the creator was a trickster and you could trust nothing. It's not really a question, so you can answer it if you want to, or we can go on.
I think evolution is probably the best explanation we have for the diversity of life now. So I think I could say, as far as I can see now, it probably is true. So I don't think that's a problem for me. I'm not sure why you would come to that conclusion. Maybe it's because it would mean that maybe he's responding. This may be a fair question, Alan. Some people teach that God built in the appearance of evolution into creation to fool people, and I think that's stupid.
Okay? I've heard, yes, yeah, I've heard.
That's
goofy. I think that's Michael Behe's argument, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe so. It's goofy. Okay, I don't like it at all. It's dumb, and so if you don't like that argument, then you're justified for saying that's stupid. I'd say it's stupid as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And really, if evolution is true, oh no, he says if evolution isn't true and a solid fact.
Does that mean if evolution is true?
I think he meant if evolution is true. I'm not sure, because if evolution is true, then in my opinion, that eliminates the need for a creator. But I don't know. I don't understand the question. Maybe it's not phrased right. Who knows? Here's another one from Antangelo Grasso. I hope I said the name right. I'm sorry if I butchered it. How do you explain our existence without a creator? I have never seen an atheist providing a consistent, compelling answer. This is clearly a question for you, William.
Yes, as an atheist.
How do you explain our existence without a creator? Listen, Untangelo and everybody else listening. Here, all right. So I'm going to say this again. I don't know how else to say this any clearer. I am not here to tell you how we can exist without a creator. I don't know. As William and I have spent an hour of the show agreeing upon that you can't actually know anything for certain We're just evaluating the data and making our best guess. So when you ask me, how do you explain our existence without a creator? My answer is, I don't know. And the answer, and that answer is okay. Now, I could give you scientific probabilities and answers. I can say the Big Bang is a very good explanation that produces evolution following that. That all comes as a result of energy. Energy reaches entropy. But if there's a multiverse and the multiverse allows for the black holes to pass energy that's gone through entropy into each other's universes and revive again and continue a whole new system of big bangs and perpetually evolve forever and ever more, and it could have existed for eternity. That is a great answer to me. It makes sense. It totally works. Am I saying I know that that's the answer? I know that I know that I know. No, I don't know. I don't know 100%. But here's the issue. Just because we don't know the answer does not give us the right to take a gigantic leap and say, therefore, if we don't know, it must be a creator God. No, that's, even William would say that's not a good reason to leap to God. There's got to be something more substantial than just, if we don't know, it has to be God. That's a horrible answer. So when you ask me, how do you explain our existence without a creator? There's a lot of different possibilities that we may never have yet even encountered. Science has given one. Quantum physics has come up with the multiverse. These are great possibilities. But even if we don't know, explaining it with God just because you don't know does not mean God is the answer. Man, I just wish people could understand that. It's like, why leap to some dramatic conclusion because you don't have the answer? I don't know is good enough. Like, sometimes you just have to settle with that. Sometimes you just have to be okay with that answer. And by the way, everybody, if you're watching, I think I effectively eliminated our trolls. I blocked them and deleted their comments. And if any of you know how to prevent that from happening in the future through StreamYard, YouTube, whatever means I have to do it, please private message me. Let me know, because I want to make sure they do not ruin the experience in the future, because this is a lot of fun. And you're right, their comments were just annoying as all get out. Michael Beverly says, so you're admitting evidence doesn't matter, right? That's for you, William, I'm certain.
Am I admitting evidence doesn't matter? No, absolutely not admitting that at all. We didn't get to talk about this very much tonight, but there's a difference between empirically established knowledge and deduced or deductive reasoning. I think deductive reasoning is a valid way to establish truth, and I think it is based on evidence that is consistent with a hypothesis. What I mean, if I were to say, I think AlanBondar is a grapefruit, well, I would need to prove. I would need to.
Well, you might be right about that. I don't know.
You would say, well, first of all, he shows none of the attributes of a grapefruit. And so none of the evidence is consistent with your hypothesis. That's a bad hypothesis. I've always say AlanBondar seems to be a human being. Then I would say, well, what's the evidence consistent with that? Well, he shows attributes that align with what human beings have. So the evidence based on deductive reasoning would indicate high probability that he is absolutely a human being and not a grapefruit. So evidence is important. And when we talk about something like the existence of God, I think my approach does appeal to deductive reasoning and saying that the evidence that I see seems to be consistent with the idea of all the attributes that are applied to the classical God of theism. And there are several attributes, but yeah, so evidence absolutely matters. It matters immensely in my approach.
All right. Appreciate the answer. Thank you, William. I'm looking for any more questions. I got a lot of comments. Could be a good, probably good. What caused the big, poppycock, there are no reasonable answers. What caused the Big Bang? Again,
the bigger bang.
The bigger bang. I mean, who knows? Who cares? Like the point is, even if, oh my goodness, I don't know how else to explain this. Even if we don't know the answers to your questions, does not give you the right to say, therefore God. It could be therefore orangutans, or therefore unicorns, or therefore gurings, or therefore belugas. Like, just like not being able to have an answer does not give you the right to just conclude God. Like, you have to have more substance to that than just I want it to be God. Like, it could be any possibility of a million gazillion possibility options. It's just like asking me why I don't. This is why I keep and I'm sorry, William. I was going to say this is why I keep telling you. Asking me as an atheist that I don't have better answers means I have a worldview. It doesn't mean that. It means I don't know. I don't care. I'm not trying to provide a worldview. I'm simply saying, just because I don't have an answer doesn't mean you get to declare God. Like, that's all I'm saying. William, unfortunately, more than most, has actually tried to give better answers than just, if you don't know, therefore God. Like, so I've appreciated these discussions way more than I have with most people. So I appreciate you, William. You're a lot more fun to discuss with. Let's see. Let's see. Questions. Okay, I got once blocked. You're good. All right, so that means I got rid of those trolls. So is that all I need to do to block future trolls? See, you need a moderator so they can block people. Why? Okay, so apparently, Homemaker Calling, you need a moderator so they can block people. Because so that's all right. Homemaker Calling, you're my new moderator. Let's talk.
You're hired.
You just volunteered.
You have the job.
You just volunteered your services. Yeah, we'll talk. This sounds fun. Let's at least get somebody in here to block that, because that was annoying. I emailed down with the process, how to add mods. Oh, okay, good. So there might be a process. Awesome. I got a thumbs up with Homemaker Calling. Awesome. Let's mute the opponents. I'm not seeing questions. We have reached the end, and that's it. All right. So that is the end of our show. William, thank you as always for being a really pleasant theist in a discussion with an atheist. Bro, I love these conversations. I can't tell you how pleasant they are. And I've gotten a lot of comments from people who watch the show who say it's so nice to watch the dialogue going on here, because we actually listen to each other. We talk. Sure, we get heated sometimes, but at the end of the day, we're not just sitting here interrupting each other like a lot of people do. It's nice, dude. And I've said to you several times, I feel like I've developed a great friendship with you, and that is rare. And I really appreciate it, man. So thank you very much for your friendship, for being on the show. Thank you all for participating and being a part of this. We will see you all next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel, 6 p.m. William, over and out. Good night.